And as it says in the window, if you can put your microphones on mute. If you want to speak and ask questions, that's totally fine, but just take yourself off mute and then put yourself back on again when you've finished. But ideally, if you've got a question during the session, just type it into the chat window. We are recording the session for those people that can't take part at the moment, and we'll make it available later on in case you want to revisit it. And we're probably going to run the session again later in the year, just based on what feedback we get from today. Also, we're going to ask you at the end of the session to fill out a feedback form, just so that we can get a bit more feedback about how you found the session, if you found it useful, and anything that you want going forward. So people that are going to be doing it today is Anna, who's the Senior Content Manager, and Sam, who's the Senior Content Producer. And they're going to take you forward with creating great content. And if everyone's ready, I will sign over to them now.
Hello everyone, hope you can hear me okay. My name is Anna, I'm the Senior Content Producer in the content team here at Age UK. And Sam and I are just going to take you through some of our top tips and some of the principles we follow for creating great content online. So what is content, first of all? Well, as Ron Burgundy here will tell you, it is kind of a big deal. Obviously, I'd say that because it's my job, but content really is so important. It's one of the best ways we can engage people with what we do, keep them informed and feeling inspired, and also get them to take action. Content's really vital to a strong brand. So without taking the time to produce great content, our jobs are going to be much, much harder. That said, content is a bit of a buzzword, isn't it? So what do we actually mean when we say content? To us here at Age UK, it's anything. It's not just words, but it's video, it's images, it's audio, it's people's stories, and it's all there to help convey a message and either inform people, educate them, encourage them to take action, or inspire brand loyalty. So it's a very broad brush. But it's really central to everything a charity does because it's how we give people information online or through our information guides. It's how we encourage people to support us by volunteering or fundraising. We need to inspire people, and the best way to do that is to demonstrate how what we do makes a difference to people's lives, and we do that through telling stories. So today we're really going to focus on online content. So there's content, you can get it in lots of different ways, printed or online, but today we're going to talk about digital content. And digital content is different from print content because the way people access content when they're reading online is different. We're going to talk about that a bit more in later on, but in a nutshell, these are the things that make online content great. It's accessible, so anyone can understand it, whether they have a reading age of 7 or they have a PhD. And also, if people are, for example, partially sighted, they need to be able to understand the page perhaps by using a screen reader. So online content, great online content is user-friendly. It's intuitive for people to understand what information is on the page. It's clear what happens when someone clicks on a link or a button or to play a video. It's easy to use, basically. And to make content user-friendly, it needs to be easy to read and easy to scan. And that means it's broken up into bite-sized chunks with sensible headings. It's in good-sized paragraphs, and you use things like bullet points so that the person's not having to trawl their way through a massive long piece of text. And going on from that, it needs to be concise. You don't need to pad out your content online in the way you might do in print to make it nicer to read. Online content, you just need to give people the information quickly so they get what they need from it straight away. And now I'm going to hand over to the lovely Sam to tell you a bit more about audiences. I can't hear you. Sam's just unmuting herself. 1 second. We'll be with you in a sec.
Sorry about that. Can everyone hear me now? Yep, great. Okay, I'll just share my screen again. And get back to the right place. Knew there would be a technical glitch at some point. So before you start writing any content, you need to be really clear who you're talking to. And although everything you're writing is going on the same website or channel, every piece of content will have its own unique audience. So if it's a big piece of content, you might be able to do some proper research into your audience, or that research could be as small as just sitting at your desk and taking a few minutes to decide who you want to talk to. So some of your audiences might be a supporter, a volunteer, a beneficiary, the child of an older person or the grandchild of an older person. And remember that you're not always just talking to one audience. So decide if there are multiple people who need to access your content. A good example of this is our Big Knit campaign. So we consider this as a really great opportunity to engage with a new audience. Innocent target their content to a young audience. So that's what we try to do too in our imagery and in our tone of voice, but all the time remembering that a large proportion of the people who knit hats for the campaign are beneficiaries as well. So older people attending things like knit and natter groups. And while that doesn't change much in terms of how we write, it's good to remember that because you wouldn't use the sort of language that our fundraising team might sometimes do. So talking about vulnerable older people, for example, as that might be offensive to that audience. So even if you decide that your content is only going to be targeted at one group of people, just remember that people from other audience groups might read it too. We're going to be talking throughout this presentation about creating a page for a lunch club at Age UK Anytown, just as an example. So to start this off, let's decide the audience for a lunch club. Our main audience for this is going to be older people, as they're the people we want signing up for the group. But the people who find this page may also be the children of younger people, as they're looking for a way to get their parents out of the house and socialising. Or it could be someone who wants to volunteer at a lunch club. So you've decided your main audience, and you've also got two secondary audiences. Once you've decided your audience, you need to work out the aims and objectives of the content. So that objective defines what we would call a call to action, and your call to action could be to sign up for an event, for a class, for a campaign, for a newsletter. It could be to get in contact, it could be to share the content or donate. And once you've decided that, the whole piece of content needs to centre around it. And that includes, even if you're sent a campaign by the National Office, something like the Christmas campaign, the Big Bag Challenge or the Big Knit, it's still key for you to decide what your own call to action will be within this. And just a quick note that there are some exceptions to the call to action rule. So some pieces are for the purpose of engaging and inspiring your audience. And so something like a case study. And in this context, the call to action doesn't necessarily need to be the main thing. But if you can't think of a central purpose for your piece, it's worth considering whether the piece of content you're writing is really necessary. So for examples of some calls to action here, and for our lunch club that we've already decided the audience for, the purpose will be getting people to sign up for the lunch club. So now you've decided your audience and the purpose of the content, it comes down to presenting it in the best way possible. First, let's think about how people read online and why that's different to how they read in print. So when you're reading something like a newspaper, you're reading it for the story and as entertainment. But when you're reading information online, you're reading it to get the information you need as quickly and easily as possible. The exception to this, again, as I mentioned, is if the purpose of the piece is to tell a story, like if it's a case study. But this diagram here shows the results of an eye tracking experiment where a research group called the Nielsen-Norman Group tracked the parts of the page that people's eyes went to the most often. And it shows that people look at websites in an F shape. So they read the top line, then they scan down the left side of the page for information, then they read some headings, and the further you get down the page, the less anyone looks at the content. So it shows that people scan around a page to find the information they're looking for rather than reading the whole page like they would an article or a book. So even if someone's come to your site to look for information specifically, they're not reading every word. So it's always worth keeping that in mind. So what can we learn from this eye tracking research? The first thing is that it's important to front load information. So what I mean by that is putting the most important information at the very top of the page and following it with anything less important. So what's the main thing you want people to know or do? You need to make that clear by the end of the introduction. Then if there's a call to action, make that as high on the page as possible. So in this example here, which is for our campaign page about TV licenses, it's clear within the first 3 lines that TV licenses for older people are under threat and that we want people to sign a petition to change that. There's a tiny bit more context, and then the call to action, the sign the petition button, is really obvious and clear and high up the page. There's lots more content after this button on the page, and that's for the people who do want to read on, and they want to read case studies, they want sort of more background to the situation. But for the people who are just coming to sign the petition, they can do that really quickly and easily. This obviously differs significantly from how you'd present a piece about the TV license campaign in print. In print, you might write an article about why TV licenses are important, and then at the very end, you'd ask people to sign a petition. But online, there should be no air of mystery. You just are upfront in your ask. So, eye tracking also shows that you lose people's attention quickly. So you should keep online content as short as it can possibly be. Don't put in extra information just for the sake of it. Think about what's really essential. This is an example of some content we were recently sent about state pension age. It was a press release, meaning the main audience was journalists, and the aim for the content was to get the journalists to pick up an interesting story that was worthy of media attention. So that piece went into the media section of the site. But this here is what we turned it into for the news section of our site. So this piece had a totally different audience. And that audience we decided was people around the age of 55 to 65 who aren't yet claiming their pension, but are close to doing so. Most of the information in the original press release was sort of superfluous to this audience because our audience didn't need loads of context. They just needed to know what was changing, when it was changing, and how it was changing. And plus, in the original piece, there were some kind of scary stats and facts that might have been really off-putting, stuff about how difficult it is to manage on a state pension. And so we cut our new piece basically down to the essentials. The main thing we wanted the audience to do was check their state pension age. So the call to action for this is really high up on the page. It's also worth noting that our call to action, just an arrow there, linked off to the government state pension age checker tool, which is a really useful tool. And so it's important to know that if someone else does something better than you can do, don't try and spend time replicating it yourself. Just send them to the best place. So don't try and keep them on your site just for the sake of it. You should also be keeping your paragraphs short, so much shorter than your teachers ever taught you to at school. Think about when you read an article on BBC News, how short their paragraphs are. It's much easier to read something like this, which, as I say, is from the BBC News site, than reading something like this, which I just found on a college website. So just think about how it looks and how easy it is to read, and one sentence paragraph is absolutely fine. Generally, just keep it as short as possible. Don't use 2 words if one will do, and use short words instead of long words. So that's stuff like use next to instead of adjacent, because instead of as a consequence of, and instead of in addition to. And plainenglish.co.uk is a really good resource to help you with this kind of thing. So they have lots of free guides to help you use simple, clear English that everyone can understand. Another way to make the page easier to scan is by breaking it up. So there are lots of ways to do this. The first is by splitting it into chunks and giving each chunk a sensible heading. Those headings will then act as a marker for the page to help people decide where the information they need on that page is contained. Another way is to use bullet points. So this should only be used where sensible, obviously, but if there's a list, it's much easier to read that in the form of a bulleted list than it is to read it as a long sentence. Images are a great way to break up the page too, make it easier to read. And remember that you can always use Brand Hub for this if you don't have a big bank of your own images. And if you have lots of stats, is there a way to present that information in a way that's easier than reading lots of numbers? So for example, can you use a mini infographic like the one here that says 7 to 8 hours? That one just took us a few minutes to mock up on Photoshop, and it makes the information much easier to digest and scan through. So now I'm just going to hand over to Anna to talk about some good and bad examples of content.
Hello, everyone again. Can you hear me, Sam?
Yeah.
Oh, awesome. So yes, I'm just going to talk to you about how not to talk. So we've got a little example of some content we've mocked up that is not as good as it could be. So it says, at Age UK Any Place, an elderly person is able to find many ways to receive help, support, advice and tips to make an older person feel better in later life. We offer a multitude of services, including tail-nail cutting, day centres, help with applying for benefits, Christmas parties and many more things. It is possible to be helped with a weekly shop, learning new skills like knitting and forging new friendships. So I'm going to teach you to suck eggs a little bit here, but here's why this isn't great. It's really long. It's got many clauses in it. It's quite boring. It's quite difficult to read, actually. There's no warmth. There's not a lot of personality. And you'll notice it's written in the passive voice, which means things are done to a person rather than the person doing them. So, you know, you can be helped with rather than we can help you, or yeah, putting the person at the center of what you're saying. So here's how we could improve for online content that piece of text. Starting off with a question. That's a really good, engaging way of getting people to involve themselves with your content. And then a lovely short sentence, Age UK Any Place is here to help. It's really clear that there's warmth there, there's a sense that you're going to do something for them. And then using the bullet list to just outline the ways you can help, it just makes it really clear, easy to scan, and someone can get the information without having to kind of trawl through a big long paragraph. So we'd really encourage everyone to think about breaking up their copy and asking people questions and really writing it for your audience and directing it to them. Back to Sam now for another section.
So I'm just going to do a quick segue into talking about PDFs, because when there's a lot of information to present, it's tempting to just upload a PDF that you've already made, already had designed. But this is a big no-no. Sorry for my huge cross here. But PDFs are really inaccessible online. They're hard to read on a mobile device, and they're usually designed to be read as printouts rather than on a screen. You also have to download them, which is annoying if you're on a mobile and you don't have much data. Again, it's just about thinking about your audience and how they're accessing your information and whether it's the easiest way for them to do it or not. Ultimately, if the information you want to put in a PDF is important, then you should find a way to put that information on the web page itself. So, moving on to tone of voice. When you're writing content, it's really important to think about that tone, because this is what gives you personality and makes people want to engage with you. So in its simplest sense, your tone of voice should be really warm and really human. To pick a random example, this is how you could talk about Wi-Fi in a really technical, detailed way. It's a family of radio technologies commonly used for the wireless local area networking of devices, which is based around blah, 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 blah. But this is how Virgin talks about Wi-Fi in a really warm and friendly way. Like, meet intelligent Wi-Fi. That's the number of people and devices in your home, so you can just crack on with the things you love. So even when you're writing about something complex or boring, there's always a way to do it in a more simple and interesting way. So if Virgin can do it, we can do it too. Things like puns are fine to develop your tone of voice, but be careful with how you use them. If you were writing a magazine piece, a pun in a title might be a great way to catch the audience's attention. But online, the title needs to really accurately summarize what's on the page. Otherwise, people might never end up there in the first place, and search engines won't know when to direct people there. So when you're writing, talk like you talk if you were chatting to a friend. Don't formalize it just for the sake of it. Use the words that real people use, not long or fancy words. Avoid jargon and acronyms where possible, as they just don't really help anyone. And a good tip to help you check if you've done all of this is to read the content out loud. Does it sound like something you would say to a friend? So now let's talk quickly about the dreaded SEO, because it is really important, but it's not actually as technical from a content perspective as you might think. So here are some basic tips. Firstly, good content is the most important thing for ranking well in search engines. If your page has a clear title, sensible headings, is well written and answers people's questions, it will ultimately do well. So the title of the page, what you might hear referred to as the H1, needs to accurately reflect what's on the page. If it doesn't and people get to the page but then leave immediately because they don't get what they need, your page won't rank well in search engines. You should pick a keyword or keywords so for our lunch club, your keyword would obviously be lunch club, but you might also choose a secondary keyword. So is there another term for lunch club that you or your beneficiaries use? Or you might want to use the name of your location so that people searching locally find you. So any town would be your secondary keyword here. And then make sure your primary keyword is in the title and either your primary or secondary keywords appear in the introduction too. In the early days of search engines, people thought that keyword stuffing would get them ranked highly. So for your lunch club page, you'd put that keyword in every heading and every paragraph. But now Google is much more intelligent and penalizes you for doing that sort of thing because it doesn't want you to trick it basically into ranking you highly. And finally, to help you choose your title, keywords, and content, think about what terms your audience are actually searching for online and what information they really need when they do. And then the final thing you need to think about in terms of SEO is your meta description, which is one of the first fields you'll fill out when creating a new page in the CMS. This is what you'll see when you go to create a new page, and the information for public search engines is also known as metadata, and it's important because it's the first thing your audience will see if they come to you through a search engine. So if someone searches lunch club for older people in Lancashire, they might come across something like this. So the page name for Google is this bit, and the page description for Google is this bit. So make sure you include all of these things because people will definitely see them. And now I'm going to hand back to Anna to talk about putting all of these tips together.
Yeah, so we just wanted to show an example of using this lunch club that we're setting up in Anytown, how a page for it could look. So what we think is some good content for this lunch club. So if Sam can pop us onto the next slide. Thank you. Here's what we think could work really well. So you've got your nice H1 title at the top, Anytown Lunch Club, then a really lovely engaging photo, which makes people feel warm and fuzzy and actually maybe recognise themselves in that. A short intro that sums up exactly what the lunch club is like. So come and join us at our weekly lunch club. There'll be great food, brilliant company and a chance to meet other like-minded people in the area. Then you'll notice there's headings to guide people through the page. So we've got key details so they understand exactly where it is, when it is, and how much it costs. And then a nice prominent sign up button, because obviously what we want them to do is come along to the lunch club. So we need to give them lots of opportunities to sign up. Then another section about what to do if people are nervous about meeting new people, which is, as we all know, a common worry for people. So a little bit of copy there to help people feel more reassured. Another sign up button, and then a lovely case study at the bottom. If you can use a real person story or quotes from real people, it's so much more engaging and authentic for people. And they're much more likely to listen to other people like them than they are just to us, unfortunately. And then ending again with another really strong sign up button. It's fine to repeat yourself and ask people to sign up 3 times. People don't notice that they're being repeated to in that way. They just think, oh, it's easy, I'll sign up now. So that's what we think a really nice, short, sweet, clear page should look like. It's got the audience at its heart and it's got a really clear purpose. So that's what we should be aiming for with all great content. And that is us. That's everything we have to take you through today, but we'd love to answer any questions if we can. So if anyone has anything they'd like to ask Sam or I, please do.
Yeah, so if you do have any questions, thank you very much. That was a great presentation and I hope you all appreciated it. But if you've got any questions, type them in the chat window and then we'll sort of like dish them out if for Sam and Anna to answer them. And there are no stupid questions, so anything you want to ask, just take the opportunity now. So yes, so Ben, we are. I think we're going to. We've recorded it, so you should be able to get a version of this later. I think we could give you the presentation, but I think without the context around it, it probably wouldn't make it that helpful for you. So we'll just try to get the recording out and then we'll put it on the Digital Hub and then you'll be able to watch it again there. So Deborah says there's no chance of getting more images available from Brand. So Deborah, you should have access to Brand Hub. I don't really know very much about it. We're going to do a webinar about it in the future, but there is quite a lot of images in there. So if you don't have access to that, drop me an email to partner.content and then I'll forward it on to the right people to see if we can get you access. And so Stacey, they said, what should we use instead of a PDF to give more information? So Sam and Anna, what you were saying about putting content on the web page?
Yeah. So essentially all of that information, if you genuinely think that information is necessary, then it should be on the page itself. And even if that's a lot of content, you find a way to present it, like I said, in a way that's kind of broken up and split up into sensible headings, into lists, and in the most easy to read, easy to scan way possible. And if you don't think it's that important, then it just doesn't need to be there.
And you can think about using things like the accordion block, which I'm checking with Christopher that that's on the.
We do have, yes, we do have an accordion block.
So the accordion block lets you kind of hide content behind a heading so that people can open it if they're really interested. But if they're not, they don't have to. It doesn't take up as much room on the page. It's really useful. We use that one a lot.
I guess that was one of my questions to you as well. So like, if you know that there's a lot of information that's going to be in a PDF, how do you decide that that whether it's important enough to be converted into HTML? Is it that it's content that's so technical that it needs to be updated, and so therefore you should put in an email link so that someone could request it if they need anything further? How do you define that?
Sorry, Christopher, can you ask that one again?
So if that question of like, how do you know whether if the contents you would have put it in a PDF and then you were going to put it onto the website in terms of putting it as text, how do you make that decision?
Well, I guess it's thinking about like, what was the purpose of the PDF? Why did you have the PDF in the first place? Is it, summarizing a service, in which case you've got to think about what's important. It's, as Sam was saying, identifying your audience. What do they need to know and why do they need to know it? And if they don't need to know everything, then it's that kind of editing of yourself and thinking, okay, these people need to know this bit, but they maybe don't need to know this bit. Or yeah, as you say, adding an email address saying, if you want to know more, you can contact us. Or making more than one page, which is also fine.
Okay. Thank you. Beth had a question which said she isn't necessarily about the CMS, but she wanted to know about filtering devices for people to search clubs and groups. So there's two answers to this. One is we do have a rudimentary events functionality on the site, which if you drop me an email, I can tell you more about. But also going forward, which is kind of moving away from this question, but just as you've asked it, I thought I'd cover it here. We are looking at expanding the local directory. So that you would all be able to put in your events online, and then they will be able to filter that way. That will be coming out. We'll be working on it now, and then we'll be looking at kind of piloting it later in the year. So in the meantime, there is the we call it the events functionality, which you can use, but that's the details of that are on the digital hub. Yeah, so Deborah, I'll take, yeah, if you drop me an email, I'll take you, I'll get someone to contact you regarding the Brand Hub and how to search for it. As I say, we're going to do a session on that in the coming weeks, and I think it'd probably be better if we deal with that offline, and then we can open it up and when we actually have the online session. Who we can contact first? This is a question from Katie Ski. So sorry if I've pronounced that wrong. Can let me know who to contact at Age UK National for brand guidelines. And again, I think that would be partner marketing, if I'm correct. Is that right, Anna and Sam?
Yeah, we also have a brand mailbox which people can contact. Let me just find the address for that. 1 second. I have a feeling it's going to be something really obvious like brand.mailbox, but I just want to make sure I get it right for you. Oh, brand services at ageuk.org.uk.
Is that one word, brand services or brand?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. So there are lots of questions about Brand Hub. More questions about Brand Hub. So yes, if you want access to Brand Hub, then every Age UK should have a user that has access to Brand Hub. So you might have to track down inside your organisation who has it. But if you don't know that or no one knows, then drop me an email. I can pass it on to the person that runs the Brand Hub, and then they can, give you that access accordingly. Ben has a question for SEO. If you put information of activities under an activities and event drop-down menu, are they still easily accessible via Google and Bing, etc.? Yes, they should be, as long as you put in your. I mean, Anna and Sam can correct me, but as long as you've got as long as you haven't hidden the page from Google and you have got the keywords and the titles in there, it should be found when your site is accessed by Google.
Yep, it'll crawl the page no matter where you put the content.
That was the word I was looking for, crawl, but I couldn't think of it. More Brand Hub. Menica says, can you see a bit more about adding keywords to the search engine section when building a web page? I always struggle with, should I include all possible search terms, e.g. Age UK, Anytown, etc. Yeah, so can you just sort of expand a bit on that from earlier?
Yeah, can you just repeat the question quickly? Sorry, I can't read them.
Oh, okay. It says, can you say a bit more about adding keywords to the search engine section when building a web page? Should they always include all possible search terms, e.g. Age UK, Anytown, age concern, in the keyword section, or should it be something that they shouldn't really use and just focus more on the actual written content?
Yeah, so the written content is the most important thing. Like I said, don't try to keyword stuff, and don't worry too much about all the alternatives. As long as your title and your heading, like I say, is really descriptive, and your content is good and says what it needs to do and does what it needs to do when people get to it, then they're the main things you need to worry about. There are tools out there like Google's Keyword Planner that allow you to see what terms people are actually searching for. And that's kind of maybe a session for another time. But if you feel like you could teach yourself that, then just search for Google Keyword Planner and have a play around with that to see what search terms you should be using. But yeah, don't worry too much about the keywords.
Yeah, we've just spoken to our resident SEO expert who's going to do a webinar for you guys more on SEO. And he says Google hasn't really cared about keywords for 10 to 15 years. It's more important that your content's good.
Yeah.
So content is key, as they say.
Yeah.
So Beth, when you say would that be for a charity run events only, can you explain what you mean? And then I'll come back to that one later. So I think it's Kaja said, where can you create illustrations such as icons to highlight important information? So I know that I have access to Photoshop, and I know the guys have access to Photoshop, but I think there are some third parties that you may actually know and you can tell them about. I can't remember the ones off the top of my head.
What, in terms of making infographics?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm not sure about that. Yeah, I just use Photoshop. So if you can get access, that would be great. I don't know if Anna, do you know of any sort of online infographic software?
So there's lots online. The thing is, though, it's not going to be in your brand, and you'll need to consider whether that's how you'd want to look. I'd advise you probably don't. So if you're able to get access to any of the Adobe suite, that's the best way to do it. So then you can be using your brand colors and your brand fonts. Yeah, sorry, that's probably not the most helpful answer, but
yeah, no, there are. Yeah, so I think there are people that have free. Can be given free versions, the same as you get with Microsoft. You can get sort of like free versions. Oh, yes, there's a website page called Canva, which is really helpful as infographic features. So there's stuff like that, which and GIMP for graphics is for free as well, which Robert says. I've always found GIMP quite confusing when I tried to use it. But again, it depends on how technical you are and how good it is. And then, as Ben says, there's Gravit.io is good and free. So there are examples out there. I think if you just do a search for them, you'll find them. But as Anna said, it all depends on what kind of branding it puts around the images that you're making.
And I've just typed there Pixlr. If you don't have
That's it, yeah.
Photoshop to resize your images, I use Pixlr. It's really good.
Yep, and that's free, and it works online, and you can save stuff directly to your. You can either save it online or you can save it to your hard drive. Let's just go back up the list. What we're looking at when you promote groups and activities. So Robert says, do you have any information about putting an Excel table onto a page? I would say don't.
Yes.
You can, so and again, the guys can correct me if I'm wrong, but you can use tables, but you can't use tables for formatting, but you can use tables for displaying of information. But I think if you can link to some other like format, or maybe that's the case where you use a PDF. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, so a table, really think carefully about what content you'd present in that. So on our website, we use it for stuff like talking about your state pension age, because there's some slightly complicated ways of working it out. But again, I'd say there's a maximum number of rows and columns you should have, and it's probably no more than about 5 each way. I mean, that's quite a large table anyway. So it shouldn't be like you've got loads of numbers to display, and so the only way you can think to display them is in an Excel, is in a table. So you just do that. Think about the best way to do it for your users.
And I would just say as well, make sure if you are going to use the table function, check how it looks on mobile before you publish. Make sure that it's formatting correctly, and it's not just created this massive long table that people are going to have to scroll down. So yeah, use the preview button and check.
Yeah, so when you are previewing for mobile, you can either shrink your, for those that don't know, you can kind of like drag your browser across the page so that it kind of mirrors what's happening on a phone. And that will give you an idea of how that table looks. So if I don't know if I'm explaining myself properly, but you just kind of grab the corner of the browser, yeah.
I could demonstrate as I'm sharing my screen.
Okay.
So let's find an HEK page. Am I still sharing my screen? No, it's
yeah, you are.
There we go. Hang on. Am I showing the HEK homepage now?
No.
No.
Oh.
I think you can.
It's only showing one of your screens, Sam.
Oh, I see. Hang on. Bear with. There we go.
Yes.
Okay, so then if you right click and then inspect this page, you can then click up here. That will show it as desktop, and then that will show it as mobile, and you can change the device that you're viewing it on. So you can look at it on an iPad, or you can look at it on a Galaxy S5, which is sort of normal phone screen size, and just navigate like you would on a phone.
And what browser are you in?
So I'm in Chrome, but
Chrome.
It works the same in all browsers.
Okay.
Or the way that Christopher was saying is you just shrink, and I don't know if this is working as I'm sharing the screen. Is that doing anything?
No.
No.
Okay. Oh, yeah.
No, yes, it is. Yes, it is.
So you just drag the screen so it's smaller, and then that shows you how it roughly looks on mobile.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you. That's the down and dirty way. Sorry. So Pandora had a question which I don't think you can answer, but we'll ask anyways. She says, everyone else is interested in the rollover function that we used to have on images. So it used to be they used to roll over the images and it would flick from one image to another. I think that doesn't work now it certainly doesn't work on the BP CMS system. I don't think you have it on the national system either. I don't even know if you used to have it either, but I think that's just been retired. So then we're talking about issues around Canva, GIMP. Katie, there is a library of infographics that's on Brand Hub, and they do get added to. I can actually show you if Sam stops sharing. I can do the same thing. Okay, so can you see my screen now? Okay. So when you log in, these are sort of the infographics that are available. These are very sort of like lo-fi ones, but they're the kind of ones that are used across the system. And then you can just go for icons here, and then that will sort of filter all the different ones that they have. And that kind of can give you a starting point. But what you can do is you can download these, and then if you wanted to put them into infographics, you would be able to use those. You know, so for whatever purpose, if you wanted to use a teacup for a lunch club or something for a gardening club, etc., that's where you could use those.
And also, I'm sure our colleagues in the brand team, if you emailed that brand services mailbox, they can help out and advise if you've got questions about infographics. They'll be able to help there.
And then Beth has a question. I'm looking to do a big piece of work on the AGK06 website to redesign it. How would you recommend I go about this? So I think you'll have to give me a bit more detail about that, Beth, as into whether you're talking about redesigning the look and feel of it, which you aren't able to do because the brand is standard across all of the sites, or if you're talking about more specifically about content and UX. So with this is a kind of, this session is about content. We're going to do another one about UX and about how you would, the different sections and how you would kind of build those around the sites that you have. So yeah, I mean, we'll cover that. Some of that will be covered now, or has been covered now, and the rest of it will be covered in when we do a UX session about why the sites look the way that they do, and two, what the best practice is for when you build sections and how you kind of construct pages. So there'll be a bit of crossover with this, but this one is fundamentally about how you should create content. And UX is user experience, so it's the experience of the user when they're using the site, as Ben and Diana were asking. So does anybody else have any other questions? As I say, you can drop us an email at partner.content and I can then forward them on, or I can answer them specifically. And as I'm saying, if you go to a lot of the guidance that we have is on the Partner Hub. I'm sure can you all see that?
Yep.
We've got some guidance here for just the technical side of things, but we've also got some content guides. Here's the content section about how you can tips for writing effective calls to action, using our browser to preview responsive content, which was also covered. If you were going to create more multimedia content in terms of videos, tips for blogging, and those sorts of things. So they are all there. Beth, there isn't a draft function as such. You just don't publish it, but I can do a session with you just to explain that. But I think for all of you, when you create a page or when you create a block, it's not really live until you actually publish it, and then it goes live onto the web. So you can preview it, but you can only preview it within the CMS in the pages that you're building. Okay, I think we'll end it there. So thank you very much, Anna and Sam. I think it was a great session and it's been very helpful, and hopefully we'll revisit it maybe later in the year. But as I say, it's going to be on, it's been recorded, so you can download it. And also we are going to send out a form to you all later on, just so you can give some feedback on how you found the session, what you wanted going forward, and just to tell the guys what you think about it. If there's nothing else, we will speak to you at the next session. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.